What's up? I'm Drew Paul Bell, and what I want to talk about with you about today is a question we got from our friend Ahmed Haas, and he wants to know the first stages of design. Do we start with designing space and then we make form or the skin, or do we start with masses/form and then embed spaces inside it? So I think that the way that you design, to me, what makes the most sense is designing the space, designing the program first. You have to understand what goes into a building before you can start designing the building. With the way that you described this here, you said, or do we start with masses and then embed spaces inside it? To me, that sounds very shallow and unrelated to the real purpose of architecture, right? It's not about just making some fucking shape and then putting people in it. Human beings, the occupants, ought to be the center of this whole design process. It's about human beings. That's how anybody is going to experience your building, is going to be through their own body. So you have to understand what they're doing. I think you have to put them at the center of the process. You have to understand the human scale. You have to understand cognitive assumptions about the way that a building ought to operate. You know, you have to be able to know where the front door is. You have to be able to know how to move through the space. You have to be able to tell kind of what space it is, whether this is a commercial or residential. And you talking here about different types of buildings like that. I think that even saying that, we're kind of splitting hairs. We're really zooming in and saying to define like this one comes first, the other one comes first. In reality, I think you actually have to deal with both of these at the same time. I think that in terms of, if you consider the whole length of the design process, I really think that form and space, like the form and the program, I really think are looked at and really in the same moment. If you might break it down to like a time code to say that, okay, well, first we're going to do, it might be the same sitting, but I still think that that program, that function has to come first. Sullivan said, form follows function. Now, a lot of people misunderstand this quote. They think that it means that form is subordinate to function, and that's not what he meant. He meant that these two things follow each other, right? That they go together. However, he does say that form follows function, so thereby, I think what he's saying is that function comes first, form follows right afterwards. But these are both things that have to kind of intertwine. They have to both make sense, and that is kind of the eternal question with design: is how do you merge these two ideas, form and function? I don't think that one ought to truly dominate the other. I think that they both have to work well with each other. So the one answer is that neither of them really comes first. They both have to work together. But if you're really going to zoom in and look at your process, I think that you have to understand the program first before you start putting form to it. Furthermore, in terms of even just studying for the ARE, if you look at like the way that they break down those exams, there's a whole phase of the design process that's called planning. And a lot of that comes down to creating programs. The program meaning like what functions go on in this building, what do the clients really need? And you have to be able to identify within the stage of the design process. This is really understanding the spaces and the program before you ever putting a form to it. There's one way to do that where you spend a lot of time working on that program before you ever even touch what the building looks like. So it's also common to really focus on that first, and I think that makes the most sense if you're looking at like how a building is gonna, like how say a lab building could go together. You need to understand the needs, the programmatic needs for that lab. How many lab spaces are you going to have? What kind of functional requirements are going to be required in that, like plumbing and spatial requirements, what kind of storage requirements. You have to be able to pin all that stuff down. And if you're dealing with big buildings, definitely space comes first. That program has to come first. And then it's about understanding a form that you can create with that. But to make some shape and then cram spaces into it seems insensitive to the way that it's going to be used and really kind of immature. And the only example that I can think of that would get close to doing that would be that there are building codes that are very form-based building codes. So you may have very clearly defined restrictions about what a building is allowed to look like, and that would start to get close to the idea of creating a form first and then putting space inside of it. But I still think that there's decisions that have already been made, even with something like that, even with like a building code or ordinance that defines that very strictly about what that form is allowed to look like. That area is probably also zoned already as residential or zoned as commercial or mixed use or whatever. So there's that idea of like the function of what is actually going to happen in that building. That's already been thought of. And so I think that the safe answer to this is to say that function has to come first. However, form always has to follow, because you could probably see how you could easily take this to say that, oh, function is all that matters, and then make ugly buildings. And a lot of developers, a lot of designers have done that. So that's what I think about this. I hope this answers your question. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time.